The restaurant buzzed with quiet elegance, filled with well-dressed patrons enjoying their expensive meals. The soft clinking of silverware and hushed conversations created an atmosphere of refinement, an environment meant for the wealthy, the privileged, the ones who belonged. She definitely belonged. Seated at the corner table, a woman in her mid-50s delicately sliced into a filet mignon, her diamond bracelet glistening under the warm glow of the chandeliers. Everything about her screamed wealth, her tailored designer dress, her carefully manicured nails, her air of superiority. The waitress, on the other hand, did not belong. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with a weary look that suggested life had never been kind. Her uniform, though neat, was slightly worn, her shoes scuffed from long shifts. She moved with quiet efficiency, her face carefully neutral, avoiding unnecessary interaction with the customers. That was until she reached the woman's table. The woman barely looked up as the waitress approached, holding a tray with a steaming dish. "You're late," the woman said coldly, setting down her knife with a sharp clink. The waitress blinked. "I'm sorry." The woman sighed, exasperated. "I asked for this 10 minutes ago. Do you always take your time with paying customers?" The waitress bit her lip, her hands tightening slightly around the tray. "I apologize, ma'am. We had several orders come in at once. I don't need excuses," the woman interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "People like you always have an excuse, don't you?" The word stung, but the waitress swallowed back her emotions. She was used to this. People like this woman, wealthy, entitled, dismissive, always treated service workers like they were invisible. Like they were less than human. "I'll make sure it doesn't happen again," the waitress said, her voice even, though her heart pounded. The woman scoffed, picking up her fork. "I doubt that." She waved a dismissive hand. "Go. Just, do your job properly." The waitress gave a small nod and turned away. But just as she did, the woman caught a glimpse of something. A mark. A small birthmark on the inside of the waitress's wrist, a crescent-shaped scar, faint but unmistakable. The woman's entire body went rigid. The birthmark. That exact birthmark. Her breath caught in her throat, her hands tightening involuntarily around her utensils. No. No, it couldn't be. A wave of dizziness washed over her as old memories came rushing back, memories she had buried deep, memories she had promised herself she would never think of again. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a cold sweat breaking out along her spine. The waitress turned slightly, feeling the silence stretch uncomfortably. "Ma'am?" The woman's lips parted, but no words came out. She had abandoned that child over 20 years ago. She had made peace with it. Hadn't she? Then why was she suddenly looking into the eyes of a stranger who should not exist? Her mind raced. She needed to say something, to do something, but all she could do was stare, frozen in shock, as the waitress stood before her, confused and waiting. The realization hit her like a truck. This wasn't just a random waitress. This wasn't just another girl struggling to make ends meet. This was her daughter. The same daughter she had abandoned all those years ago. And now, after decades of pretending the past never happened, the past had come back to haunt her. The woman couldn't move. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, she wasn't in that luxurious restaurant anymore. She was back in time, back to the moment when she made the worst decision of her life. The waitress stood there, still waiting for a response, confusion flickering across her tired eyes. "Ma'am?" the girl asked again, tilting her head slightly. The woman snapped out of her trance. Her throat was dry, her heart pounding too fast, too loud. She stopped herself. What was she even going to say? That she had just realized the waitress she insulted might be her own daughter? That she was seeing a ghost from her past in this dimly lit restaurant? No. That was impossible. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to regain composure. With a slow, practiced motion, she picked up her napkin and dabbed at the corner of her lips, pretending as if nothing had happened. "You're still standing here," she said coldly, her voice carefully controlled. The waitress's expression hardened. The brief moment of concern was gone, replaced with quiet disappointment. She gave a small nod and turned away, vanishing into the back of the restaurant. The woman exhaled shakily. She reached for her wine glass, but her hands were still trembling, and the liquid sloshed slightly. She needed to get out of here. Now. She threw some cash onto the table, far more than necessary, and stood up abruptly. As she walked toward the exit, she couldn't resist glancing back toward the waitress. The girl was busy serving another table, her expression unreadable, her hands moving quickly as she set down plates. That birthmark. That cursed birthmark. Her mind raced. Could it really be her? She had left that child behind over 20 years ago. Had walked away. Had promised herself never to look back. So why was she now running straight into the past? Flashback. The choice that haunts her. The rain had been falling hard that night. She remembered standing in the doorway of a small orphanage, her expensive coat pulled tightly around her, trying to shield herself from the cold. Inside, a tiny baby lay in a crib, swaddled in a thin pink blanket, unaware of the cruel world she had just been abandoned to. She had looked at the baby one last time. A part of her had wanted to reach out, to hold the child, to take it all back. But she hadn't. She had turned around, stepped into her sleek black car, and driven away without looking back. That night, she had sworn she would never think about it again. She told herself that she had done what she had to do. That the child would have a better life without her. That she had no choice. But now, standing in that restaurant, looking into the eyes of a waitress who bore that same mark, she realized something terrifying. She had been lying to herself for years. And now? The woman barely slept that night. She tossed and turned, replaying every detail of the evening over and over again in her mind. The way the waitress moved, the slight tension in her voice, the familiar sharpness in her eyes. And the birthmark. No matter how much she tried to convince herself otherwise, the possibility gnawed at her like a wound that refused to close. She had spent decades pretending that night in the orphanage never happened. But now, the past had come crashing into her life with such brutal force that she could no longer ignore it. By morning, she had made up her mind. She needed answers. A return to the restaurant. The next evening, she arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual, before the dinner rush. The hostess recognized her immediately. "Welcome back, ma'am. Would you like the same table?" She shook her head. "Actually, I'd like to speak to the manager." The hostess hesitated. "Is something wrong?" The woman forced a smile. No. I just had a few questions." After a short wait, a man in his late 40s, with neatly combed hair and a crisp white shirt, approached her. "I'm the manager. How can I assist you?" She measured her words carefully. "That young waitress from last night. I was wondering about her." The manager raised an eyebrow. "Is there an issue?" "No," she said quickly. She was just familiar. I couldn't shake the feeling that I might have known her from somewhere." The manager studied her for a moment before answering. "She's been working here for a little over a year," he said. "Good worker. Reliable. Keeps to herself for the most part." The woman leaned in slightly. "Does she have any family?" The manager hesitated. "I believe she grew up in the foster system." Her breath caught. Foster system. That meant no adopted parents. No known relatives. The girl had been alone all these years. A lump formed in her throat, but she swallowed it down. "That's terrible," she said, forcing her voice to remain even. The manager shrugged. "She doesn't talk about it much. Just keeps her head down and works. If you ask me, she's got a tough shell, but I think it's because life hasn't been easy for her." Tough shell. The woman glanced over at the restaurant floor, her eyes searching until they landed on the waitress. She was moving between tables, balancing a tray in one hand while refilling a customer's glass with the other. So efficient. So independent. Her daughter had survived without her. And now she was right there. Within reach. For so many years, the woman had convinced herself that giving her up was the best decision. But now? Now she wasn't so sure. An uncomfortable conversation. She waited until the waitress's shift slowed before approaching her. This time, she softened her tone. No arrogance. No coldness. Just curiosity. "I never got your name," she said. The waitress hesitated before responding. "Why do you care?" The woman smiled, though it felt forced. "You remind me of someone I used to know." The waitress studied her, clearly suspicious. There was defensiveness in her eyes, as if she had spent her entire life expecting the worst from people. Finally, she muttered her name. It wasn't familiar. Of course. The orphanage must have changed it. It didn't matter. She was more sure now than ever. "So, do you have any family?" the woman asked casually. The waitress stiffened slightly. "No. No siblings?" "No." The woman hesitated before asking the next question. "And your parents?" The waitress's expression darkened. "Never met them." A stab of guilt hit the woman in the chest. The girl wasn't just abandoned. She had been forgotten. Or so she had thought. A plan for the truth. By the time she left the restaurant, the woman had already made up her mind. She needed proof. There was only one way to know for sure, a DNA test. But how would she get one without raising suspicion? She couldn't just ask. The waitress would never agree. And why would she? To her, the woman was just another rude customer, a woman who had insulted her one night and now wouldn't leave her alone. No. She needed to be smart. She needed a plan. And she knew exactly how to do it. The woman spent the entire night lying awake, staring at the ceiling. The revelation had shaken her to her core. The girl had no family. No known parents. No home except what she had built for herself. And it was her fault. She had told herself for 20 years that she had done the right thing. That leaving her baby behind was an act of mercy, not cruelty. That she was saving the child from a life of struggle. Yet here she was, staring into the past, the flesh and blood she had discarded, and realizing, for the first time, that she had been wrong. Terribly, irrevocably wrong. But she couldn't just confess, not yet. The girl wouldn't believe her. Why would she? She needed proof first. And once she had it, she would decide whether she had the courage to reveal the truth. Setting the plan in motion. The woman was meticulous in everything she did. That was how she had built her fortune. That was how she had crafted the perfect life, by eliminating uncertainty, by controlling every outcome. She would handle this the same way. Step 1, get a sample for a DNA test. Step 2, if the results confirmed her suspicion, she would decide what came next. Simple. Except, it wasn't. She had no idea how to get the waitress to comply. She had to be discreet. She couldn't just ask for DNA, that would be absurd. And she couldn't risk arousing suspicion by being too pushy. Then, suddenly, it came to her. A job offer. If the girl was struggling financially, which, given her job, seemed likely, she might be willing to take a side job. And if she came to the woman's office, she could accidentally leave behind a strand of hair. It was perfect. A suspicious invitation. The next day, she returned to the restaurant, feeling more in control. The waitress was taking orders when she spotted the woman sitting at the same table. Her expression hardened immediately. She remembered. Good. The woman watched as the waitress sighed and made her way over. You again, the waitress said flatly. Are you here to complain about something else? The woman ignored the comment. I'm actually here with an offer. The waitress frowned. An offer? I run a business, the woman said smoothly. A luxury event planning firm. The waitress raised an eyebrow. And? The woman leaned forward, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound important. I'm always looking for new assistants. You seem hardworking. The waitress blinked, caught off guard. Wait, you're offering me a job? A trial position, the woman corrected. For one event. A small role, mostly organizing guest lists, helping with coordination. The pay is good. The waitress narrowed her eyes. And why exactly would you offer this to me, she asked, suspicion dripping from every word. The woman gave a calculated smile. Because I see potential. The waitress folded her arms. Something wasn't right. She had spent her entire life being ignored, overlooked. Why would someone like this woman suddenly take an interest? The offer was too good. Too convenient. She should say no. She wanted to say no. But, she needed the money. Badly. Her rent was due, her bills were piling up, and her dream of going back to school seemed further away than ever. She hesitated, then sighed. Fine. When? The woman suppressed a victorious smirk. Tomorrow evening, she said. My office. Here's my card. She placed a sleek business card on the table. The waitress glanced at it but didn't pick it up. Instead, she stared at the woman, her expression unreadable. Why do I feel like there's more to this? The waitress muttered. The woman simply smiled. There isn't. She stood up and walked away, leaving the card behind. The waitress watched her go, unease twisting in her gut. She didn't know why, but something about this didn't feel right. Not at all. A growing fear. The woman sat in her car, tapping her nails against the steering wheel. That had been too close. The waitress was sharp, smarter than she had anticipated. She sensed something was off. That could be a problem. But it was too late to back out now. She needed that DNA test. And once she had it, she would have to face the reality of her actions, whether she was ready or not. An unwanted confrontation. The next evening, the waitress arrived at the woman's lavish office building, still uneasy. Everything about this felt wrong, but she was desperate for extra cash. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The woman greeted her with a professional smile. Right on time. The office was stunning, glass walls, expensive furniture, the kind of luxury that felt completely out of reach for someone like her. The woman gestured toward a seat. Make yourself comfortable. The waitress sat down stiffly, feeling completely out of place. The woman handed her a folder. Inside is the guest list. All I need is for you to categorize them based on their status, VIPs, business partners, etc. The waitress nodded, opening the folder. As she read through the names, the woman watched her carefully. She just needed one thing. One strand of hair. A few minutes later, the waitress brushed a hand through her ponytail and a strand fell onto the table. The woman's eyes locked onto it. This was her moment. She reached for the file, casually swiping up the hair with it. She had what she needed. She forced herself to stay calm. "You're doing great," she said smoothly. "But then. Why are you staring at me like that?" the waitress asked suddenly. The woman froze. "What? You keep looking at me. Like you're studying me." The woman forced a laugh. "I'm just impressed with your work ethic." The waitress didn't believe her. She could feel it now, something wasn't right. She stood up, placing her hands on the table. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Why did you really offer me this job?" The woman felt the air thicken. She hadn't expected this confrontation, not yet. She was losing control of the situation. And for the first time in years, she felt something she wasn't used to feeling. Panic. The air inside the lavish office felt heavy. The waitress stood stiffly, arms crossed, eyes locked onto the woman with sharp suspicion. "Why did you really offer me this job?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. The woman forced herself to keep a straight face, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. She had been so careful. So meticulous. Yet somehow, this girl, her daughter, had seen through her. She couldn't lose control now. She let out a soft chuckle, tilting her head slightly. "Why are you being so defensive? It was just a job offer." The waitress didn't budge. "I don't buy it." The woman sighed, acting exasperated. "You're overthinking things." She glanced at her watch, as if suddenly disinterested. "If you're uncomfortable, you're free to leave." The waitress hesitated, studying her. It was the perfect psychological trick, reverse psychology. When people were given an easy exit, they usually second-guessed their own doubts. Sure enough, the waitress shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't say I was leaving." The woman fought the urge to smirk. "Got her." She leaned back in her chair, feigning indifference. "Good. Then let's focus on work, shall we?" For the next hour, they went over details for the supposed event. The woman pretended to take notes while, in reality, her mind was on the DNA test she had just secured. The strand of hair she had collected was tucked neatly into a small plastic bag inside her purse. It was all she needed. Soon, she would know the truth. Waiting for the results. The next day, the woman made arrangements with a private laboratory. Confidential. No questions asked. When the receptionist handed her a small envelope to store the sample, the woman's fingers trembled slightly. This was it. Once the test was done, there would be no more maybes. No more denial. She would have the truth in black and white. And the truth would determine everything. An unexpected encounter. Days passed. The results hadn't arrived yet, but the woman found herself unable to focus on anything else. Her once orderly life, perfectly structured, perfectly controlled, was falling apart. One afternoon, she found herself driving aimlessly, her thoughts spinning. She didn't even realize where she was going until she pulled into a parking lot. The restaurant. She hadn't planned to stop by today. But her feet moved on their own. As soon as she stepped inside, she saw her. The waitress was wiping down a table, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her daughter. The thought still felt foreign, unreal, even. But as she watched the girl move, the weight of it all hit her like a tidal wave. This was someone she had left behind, someone she had abandoned without a second thought. And yet, here she was, standing tall, stronger than ever. The woman's stomach twisted. Did she even deserve to know her? Before she could think of leaving, the waitress looked up, and their eyes met. For a split second, the girl's gaze softened, as if something in her recognized something in the woman. But then, it vanished. The coldness returned. "What do you want?" the waitress asked, irritation lacing her voice. The woman hesitated. She couldn't say the truth. "Not yet. I was just in the area," she lied smoothly. I thought I'd stop by. The waitress scoffed. Right. Silence stretched between them. Then, suddenly, the waitress let out a small breath and gestured toward a seat. Well? Since you're here, you might as well sit. The woman was startled. She hadn't expected that. Slowly, she sat down. The waitress poured her a glass of water. So. What's your deal? The woman blinked. Excuse me? The waitress shrugged. You're rich. You clearly don't eat at places like this. But you keep showing up. First, you insult me. Then you offer me a job. And now you're back again. The woman took a slow sip of water. I told you. You remind me of someone. The waitress snorted. That's either really sentimental or really creepy. The woman smirked despite herself. I prefer sentimental. To her shock, the waitress actually smiled. For the first time, there was no hostility, just curiosity. The woman felt something stir inside her. Was it hope? The results arrive. The next morning, a plain white envelope arrived at her doorstep. The DNA results. Her hands shook as she ripped it open. Her breath caught in her throat as her eyes scanned the words. 99.9% match. She felt the air leave her lungs. It was real. She was her daughter. The truth was no longer something she could ignore. But now came the hardest part. What was she going to do with it? The woman sat frozen, gripping the DNA test results as if the paper itself could anchor her to reality. 99.9% match. There was no mistake. She had spent years burying the past, pretending she had made the right choice. But now, the truth was staring back at her, undeniable, merciless. The waitress, her daughter, had survived. Not because of her. In spite of her. A strange mix of emotions surged through her, guilt, relief, fear. She wanted to reach out, to tell the girl everything. But how? She had spent her entire life building walls around her secrets, carefully curating the image of a woman who had everything under control. And now? Now she was about to destroy everything. An impossible confession. The next evening, she returned to the restaurant. This time, she didn't sit at her usual table. She didn't order food. She waited. The waitress noticed her almost immediately. Another customer had called for her, but she barely glanced in their direction. Her eyes stayed on the woman, narrowing slightly. She knew. She knew something was coming. The woman swallowed hard. Can we talk? The waitress hesitated. Then, with a sigh, she untied her apron and motioned toward the back door. The woman followed her outside into the cool night air. The back alley was quiet, the only sound being the distant hum of traffic. The waitress leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Well, she said. Let's hear it. What's this about? The woman took a shaky breath. There was no easy way to say it. So she didn't sugarcoat it. I know who you are. The waitress blinked. What? The woman's hands clenched at her sides. I know where you came from. I know, about the foster system. The orphanage. The waitress stiffened. How do you know that? The woman hesitated. Then, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I put you there. The waitress's face drained of color. Silence. Thick. Suffocating. The waitress didn't move. Didn't even blink. For the longest time, she just stared. And then she let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a bitter sound, hollow and disbelieving. You're joking, she said. The woman shook her head. The waitress stared at her for another long second before letting out another breathless laugh. "This is insane," she muttered. "You're insane." Her hands balled into fists. "Why would you say something like that? Why would you make something like that up?" The woman reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope. She held it out. The waitress hesitated before snatching it away, unfolding the paper. Her eyes scanned the words. Then, her hands began to shake. This isn't real," she whispered. "This has to be fake." "I had a test done," the woman said quietly. "I needed to be sure." The waitress staggered back as if the ground beneath her had shifted. "You're lying," she choked out. "You have to be lying." But she didn't sound convinced. She sounded like someone who had just had their world shattered. The woman stepped forward. "I never stopped thinking about you," she said, her voice breaking. "I never stopped wondering." The waitress snapped her head up, rage flickering in her eyes. "You never stopped wondering," she spat. "Then where the hell were you?" The woman flinched. The waitress stepped closer, eyes burning. "You had the luxury of wondering. Meanwhile, I spent my entire childhood in foster homes, bouncing from place to place, wondering why I wasn't good enough for anyone to keep me." The woman's breath hitched. "It wasn't your fault," the waitress cut in sharply. "You left me. You abandoned me." The woman had no defense. Because it was true. She had abandoned her. And now she had the audacity to come back. To tell her she had been thinking about her. That wasn't enough. Not even close. The waitress clenched her jaw, eyes glistening. "You don't get to just walk back into my life like this." The woman felt something inside her shatter. The reality hit her like a train. She had spent days obsessing over the DNA test, as if proving the connection would somehow make things right. But it didn't. It couldn't. This wasn't about science or proof. This was about a lifetime of abandonment. And the truth was, she wasn't owed forgiveness. The breaking point. The waitress shoved the paper back into the woman's hands. "I don't need you," she muttered. "I never needed you." The woman felt tears sting her eyes. The waitress turned away. And just like that, she was walking back inside. Leaving the woman exactly where she had left her years ago. Alone. The woman opened her mouth, desperate to say something, anything. But what was there to say? She had spent 20 years convincing herself she had done what was best. But the damage had already been done. And now? It might be too late to fix it. The woman stood frozen outside the restaurant, staring at the door her daughter had just disappeared through. Her daughter. She had imagined this moment so many times, what she would say, how it would feel to reunite after all these years. But not once had she considered the possibility that she would be rejected. She had convinced herself that once the truth was out, once the girl knew, everything would somehow fall into place. That maybe, just maybe, she could rewrite the past. But life wasn't that simple. And pain didn't just vanish overnight. With a heavy heart, she turned and walked away. Days of silence. She didn't return to the restaurant after that night. She wanted to, but what was the point? The girl had made it clear, she didn't want her in her life. And maybe she was right. The woman had spent her entire life running from the past, pretending her decisions hadn't left scars. But now, she was forced to stare at the damage she had caused. She had money, power, influence, but none of it could fix this. So, for the first time in decades, she did nothing. She waited. And hoped. An unexpected visitor. For days later, she heard a knock on her office door. She assumed it was her secretary, but when she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. The waitress. Her daughter. Standing there, looking hesitant, uncertain. The woman slowly stood, her heart hammering. You came. The girl exhaled sharply, arms still crossed. Yeah. I don't know why. The woman gestured toward the chair across from her desk. Would you like to sit? The girl hesitated before finally stepping inside. She didn't sit, though. Instead, she paced, eyes darting between the floor and the woman. Then, finally, she spoke. I don't know what you expect from me, she said. I don't know if you're looking for some kind of forgiveness or what, but I don't even know you. The woman swallowed. I don't expect anything. The girl scoffed. Yeah? Then why do all this? Why look for me? Why tell me? The woman took a slow breath. Because I couldn't live another day pretending you didn't exist. Silence. The girl's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. The woman continued. I made the worst mistake of my life when I left you behind. I spent years convincing myself it was the right choice. But that wasn't the truth. The truth is, I was scared. I was selfish. She looked down at her hands. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't even deserve this conversation. She looked up again, meeting her daughter's gaze. But I needed to tell you. Because whether you hate me or never want to see me again, you deserve to know the truth. The girl clenched her fists. You say you regret it, she muttered. But you still got to live your life, didn't you? While I was alone, you were out there, what? Building an empire? Buying your fancy clothes? Eating at expensive restaurants? The woman felt the sting of her words. Because they were true. I was, she admitted. And it wasn't fair to you. The girl scoffed, looking away. At least you admit it. Another stretch of silence. Then, unexpectedly, the girl let out a sharp laugh, one that wasn't really humor, but something close to disbelief. This is crazy, she muttered, shaking her head. My whole life, I wondered if my parents were out there. I used to tell myself stories, make up reasons why they left me. That maybe they were looking for me. She let out a hollow breath. Turns out, you weren't. The woman felt her chest tighten. No, I wasn't, she admitted. Not until now. And that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life. The girl stared at her, her expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she sighed. I don't know if I can forgive you. The woman nodded, accepting the words even though they cut deep. I understand. Another pause. Then. But. The woman's heart leaped. The girl ran a hand through her hair, looking conflicted. I don't know if I can forgive you, she repeated. But I don't know if I want to hate you, either. The woman barely breathed. You don't have to decide right now, she said carefully. You don't have to decide at all. If you want me to leave you alone, I will. The girl exhaled slowly. I don't know what I want. Then, after a long pause, she finally sat down across from the woman. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reunion. But it was a start. And for now. That was enough. A lesson in redemption. Life didn't wrap up neatly. People made mistakes, some too big to fix. The woman had spent years running from her guilt, but in the end, facing the truth was the only thing that mattered. Some wounds didn't heal overnight. Some pain never fully went away. But sometimes, even the deepest wounds could still make room for hope. For second chances. For new beginnings. And so, as the woman and her daughter sat together, two strangers, bound by blood but divided by time, one thing became clear. Forgiveness wasn't instant. But sometimes, all it took was the willingness to try.